Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive Hobbycast. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Today, I am very happy to be joined by James M. Hewitt. James, hello, how are you?
Well, I'm so glad to be here. It's a joy. I always love talking about games I've worked on, and this whole kind of hobby. I mean, you don't do this unless you love it, right?
Yeah.
And I love the community you've built as well. So it's really nice to be here talking to you.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's so good to talk to you. And you have 2 games in the Dungeon Dive Top 50.
It's an accolade. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
And one of the only 2 games in the Masterclass series, Silver Tower. So I'm hoping we'll be able to spin. I hope you don't mind too much dredging up your past, because I would like to talk to you quite a bit about Silver Tower, because it's kind of the definitive Dungeon Dive game in a way, and we'll kind of talk about that. But I like to start off these talks, these casual conversations, with just asking, what's on your hobby table right now? Is that some swords back there?
Yeah. So I got into LARPing.
Nice. Yeah.
Just before lockdown, ideally. Just before COVID hit.
Perfect timing.
Yep. And so it was through a bunch of friends at work. I got into it, and I'd always kind of thought, it's kind of cool, because I've been like a tabletop role player for years, and I always thought LARPing is kind of cool. But the thing that concerned me was, if you go out there and you don't enjoy yourself, you've sunk a lot of effort into that right at that point. You've made your costume, you've got your things, you're out there. But I thought, I've got some people I know who are going, I know I'll get on with them. I went to this, it's called Empire LARP. It's a UK thing. It's a full weekend festival LARP. So you go on the Friday, you leave on the Sunday. It's like 2,000 people in a field. And I thought, well, whatever happens, I'm going to spend a weekend with my friends. So yeah, went and did that. And so yeah, and then over the long lockdown period where nothing happened for a couple of years, I started making weapons and all sorts of things. I learned bookbinding. I focus on things, right?
Do you get super into something and then move on, and then get super into something and then move on, that kind of thing?
I mean, it's some call it an ADHD diagnosis. Some call it just the way I am. But so I started making weapons, and and they are passing all the checks they have to pass, which is nice. I'm now kind of outfitting our group with various things, which is cool. It's a nice way to kind of scale up a hobby I've enjoyed for a long time, because I've always enjoyed miniatures games.
Yeah.
But I don't want to bore you with details, but I've been having trouble with carpal tunnel syndrome. And a bit of RSI type stuff, and so holding a little brush on a little miniature is quite difficult for me these days. But like that, it's just like cheating. You've got a massive brush and a big sword. It's just you scale it up.
So could you say LARPing is just a miniature skirmish game with a 1-to-1 scale?
It's like there's a Venn diagram and it's almost a circle. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. The difficult part for me is I'm trying so hard to not focus on the game design part of it, and not overanalyze it and everything.
So what kind of rules do you guys play with? What are your guiding rules to where it becomes more? What makes it a game as compared to just playing make believe?
Yeah. So I mean, you look at LARPs, and what's interesting is, so any LARP has to have some kind of mechanical basis.
Right.
If you know things like combat. No, to be fair, no, that's not true, because I have actually seen some that don't have mechanical basis, and it is all very much like you take the hit as you feel your character would. But as with anything, that level of trust between players only works in a small game. There's a game here in the UK which has about 30 people. It's I think it's Saxon age, it's not Vikings, but it's that kind of aesthetic, and it's a small group of people. It's kind of almost invite only. You're very invested in it, and everyone is trusted that if you get hit with a broadsword, you're going to fall down like you've been hit with a broadsword, right? That doesn't work when you scale it up. It's the same way like D&D. So D&D is it's the mass market role-playing game, and the rules have to be quite restrictive, because you have to make it cater for a huge range of players.
Right.
And so similarly, so when you get to a big thing like Empire, or there's other ones in the UK, the names of which I've forgotten, Lorien Trust, there's a couple others, they need a rule set, obviously, right? But you can't make it too complex, because it's not like there's 2 of you standing at a table looking down at the thing. You're in the action, and you'll have referees dotted around, but the rules have to be simple enough that the average player can keep track of them, while also full of adrenaline, swinging a sword, maybe wearing chainmail.
being
Yeah,
into the moment of the
absolutely.
theatrics.
And like one of the things I love about Empire is it's a very simple rule set. So some LARPs you're tracking like I've got 3 hits on my arm, 2 on my leg. I've taken 3 levels of stun. Like
It's
I
like
couldn't track
like
that.
little BattleTech check boxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got someone following you around with like a little command card, with different things on. I've seen ones where you have to have like a little stat card around your neck, and like you fill it in, you change it as you go. But I mean, Empire is very much a it's aiming to be as immersive and streamlined as possible. So like you have a basic number of hits. Wearing armor gets you some more hits. There are a few like magic like calls and things that weapons can do, but it's all very much you get hit with a weapon, you lose a hit. If it's a special thing, like something might cleave your arm off unless it hits metal armor on you. And it's that kind of trust system, but there's enough of a rules framework to sustain it. But what I like is it's simple enough that you can just kind of not worry about it and just play to it, count your hits, take your hits, act your hits out, and then carry on. But no, it's really interesting. I love it, but I'm trying so hard not to get into the theory of it too much.
Do you guys? So let me just. Do you play? Is it quests, or is it just a big? Is it just a big battle royale?
No, it's a huge sandbox. So Empire was devised as a political game. So you've got like so there's like PvP combat, player versus player combat is possible, but not really encouraged by the system. One of the things that I like. I mean, we can talk about this, I'm sure, in this. We will get into this, but I really like carrot, not stick when it comes to game design. So encourage your players to play in a certain way by making the rules focus in that direction. So don't say to a player, no, you can't do that. Make it, well, the rules say this is the really obvious thing to do over here instead. And so what this does is the rules. So for example, you can like murder another player's character in the middle of the night, but the rules are such that you'll probably get found out and it won't be fun for you, So like I say, it's a political game. What you have, it runs over the weekend. You have 2 kind of big battles, one on a Friday morning, one on a Saturday morning, and that's like about 500 players a side, and it's just incredible. I'll send you some photos. It's epic.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
And once you're in there, like it feels real, right? And what happens is you play as your character in one. And then on the other day, you put an orc mask on, and you're a bad guy for that one.
Oh, cool! Very
cool.
And
you switch over. So whoever does that on Friday does that on Saturday, and vice versa. But then, other than that, it's just this kind of big open field. So everything is very player influenced. You've got lots of there's political positions. There's a whole like Senate. There's all these different things, magical colleges and things, all of which are run by players, and you get voted in and all this. But then if you want to go along and be a battle kind of person, there are little skirmishes you can go out on, little battles. So it's really, I mean, because it takes us, like I say, about 2,000 people at a time. You've got this, you can go in and do what you like. I know people who go along and their thing is they turn up with a musical instrument and they're a bard. They just walk around playing, or people that go and sell cakes, whatever it might be.
Like merchants selling their wares.
Yeah, they bake stuff at home. We've got a friend who's an amazing pastry chef, and he goes along and he sells like cheese and bacon pastries and things, and makes a huge amount of like in-world money. So it's awesome. Like you go along, you make what you want it to make. When you're a first-time player, one of the recommendations is just go along, just enjoy the atmosphere, because you turn up and it's like, I mean, it's like a music festival. It's that kind of scale, but everyone's in like canvas tents. It all looks like in the kind of in-character area, it looks immersive. There's campfires and things going on. It's just astonishing. The first time I saw it, my breath was taken away. It hasn't quite come back yet, I don't think.
That sounds really cool. What do you think? What do you think of like LARPing? LARPing has kind of infiltrated a pretty big sector of like the general audience with games like Pokemon Go. Like with these kind of ARG mobile phone games are really just kind of LARP, aren't they? I mean, in a way.
Yeah, I think it's all. Yeah, it's all part of the same thing. Where like what you've seen over the past like decade maybe or so is gaming in general has just kind of muscled into the mainstream, right? I think there's a whole load of reasons why that's happened.
Yeah, the gamification of life of things.
And I think it's everything from the fact that everyone has a smartphone, so they have games on their phone now. So playing video games is no longer a weird thing. You've got things like Critical Role, the big Let's Play streams and that are making role playing the thing people are just yeah, I'm going to do that. Why not? It's kind of come out of the shadows. It's just a very normal thing now. And I think, I mean, even like the TV show Hawkeye, which is on one of the Marvel shows, had a whole thing about LARPing in one of the episodes. And I think, yeah, you're right. Like people are, I can't imagine when I was at school, the idea of kind of there being a mainstream group of people who would, I mean, not that we had smartphones, but that would be willing to go and play something like Pokemon Go. It just wouldn't have happened, you know? Yeah. And I think you can take that one of two ways. You can kind of resent the fact that you didn't have it that easy, or you can celebrate the fact that kids now can have this and enjoy it. And I love that. So I think there's never been a better time to get into these kind of geeky pursuits, especially things like LARP, where you have to jump in, right? It's pretty intense. And again, it's quite a big cost to get into it in terms of time. You know, even if you kind of scour like charity shops, thrift shops to get your outfit and things, keep it quite low that way. You're spending a lot of time to get into it. But there have never been more ways to get into this kind of thing. So I'm all for it. I love that kind of stuff.
No, it's great. It's great. How strict are they with like the WYSIWYG, like as far as your outfit? 'Cause I remember you know, we'll loop back around to Games Workshop eventually, but
no, this is LARP chat now. This is what it is.
One of the first times I played at a convention way back in the day, in like the 90s, early 90s, I was playing some 40K, and it was like some kind of an official tournament. It was really poorly run because they wouldn't let me play because my Space Marines weren't painted with the proper insignia, and like, does it get that granular? With like, okay.
So Empire, the one I go to, it has a bit of a reputation as being a little bit elitist in terms of like the kit and things sometimes, because they have quite a strict brief on what you can and can't do. But I think like the outside perception of it is way worse than it is. They have some very like strict, well, they've got 3 levels. So there's unacceptable, which is you can't wear clothing past a certain era. So like, I think it says like age of sale is like out, so you can't have like tricorn hats and corsets. But before that, it's like medieval fantasy. You want to get that same kind of thing, right? They've got, you know, like footwear, for example. The most important thing is that your feet are safe.
Yeah.
But please don't wear brightly colored things, you know. So the middle level is called like aspirational, I think, or something, which is, it's not ideal, but it'll do. And the idea is you build on it, you know, you improve it over time. In the same way that like when I used to, so I ran Games Workshop stores for about 10 years, or worked for about 10 years. And the way we used to do it was we'd say, you don't have to come down with a painted army to play games here, but we want to see some progress. We want to see that you're painting it as you go. We don't want to see that same, you know, badly built squad of 10 grey orcs every
for 2 months in a row. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm getting to
that. To be fair, that is how I hobby. Right? That's my kind of thing. But like, yeah. And then of course then you have the top thing, which is like the aspirational top level kit of like, oh, if you're great, you'll do this. And what's lovely is people are so willing to help each other out. So like, it's a lovely community. We just had to think the event that was like a few weeks ago. There was a big event where everyone just brought all their old kit they didn't want anymore, and the new players can just come and grab it for free.
Oh, awesome! That's super cool.
This kind of everyone helps her out, you know. And it's so it's not that people think it's elitist, but I think it's just they have a standard because they want it to be immersive.
Well, it helps everybody else, right? I mean, it helps you get into the mood of the game. Yeah.
Because actually, once you're there, I mean, we've had friends who've come along who are like, oh, I don't know if I want to be role playing. Might not be for me. I'm going to come along because it looks fun, but I don't know about that. I want to sit in a field with you guys and drink and listen to some stories, but I don't necessarily want to be a character. But once you're there and everyone's doing it, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just be my character for the weekend. And it's
always so much easier to join in. I remember when you know, my wife, the first time I got her to play D&D with us, and you know, at first it's very intimidating and you don't really know, but if you just let yourself get taken over by the fun, say, I don't really know anybody who would not have fun if they just let themselves like get into it, right? It's that kind of like, you have to get past that sort of self-consciousness, and you have and if you see everyone else doing that and having fun, it frees you. It's so liberating. I mean, I love going along and just being my character for a weekend. And I mean, and the thing is, like, as opposed to like, so when I play like D&D or anything like that, any kind of tabletop role-playing game, I like to come up with like slightly outlandish characters that are quite different from me. When you're doing it for a whole weekend, like, the starting point is, well, I want to be like me, but a bit more this way or a bit more that way. So I play a character who is quite close to me, but he's kind of a bit of a addled like mage character, and it's just fun to go and just be that for a weekend and just be like a little bit more
I'll get to it when I get to it. Oh, I know there's nothing I need to go to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to be unreliable and let people down a bit and just kind of have fun with that. Because of course I never do that in real life. That's the underlying message.
Yeah. Are you a mono player? Like when you role play, do you tend to just play the same kind of character?
I try not to. I try really hard not to. Like I've played a lot of games. Over lockdown, I'd never role played online when lockdown happened, when we all kind of stopped being able to go and meet up and things. And I formed a little group of like 4 people, and we ran loads of little indie role-playing games, like week after week, different games, and it was really, really nice, really good fun. And like I try to always come up with a different character. Unfortunately, I don't get carried away and just play me plus one, whatever it is. I envy people that can disappear into a character. I
tend to play like this. Yeah, I always play like the same. I like old men. I like old dudes in my genre fiction. So I always end up playing like some kind of old clerik who has lost his faith. It's like, that's me, because that's me, as a human, lost my faith.
And channeling yourself through there, Yeah. I'm trying to think. So last few characters I've played. So mainly I've played some D&D lately, and I've played a half-orc barbarian who was like very family oriented. He had this whole kind of thing. So I wanted to kind of subvert the trope a little bit, and like he has anger issues, but he's not proud of them. Like that was kind of what I did that. I'm currently playing a goblin artificer who's just this kind of cheeky cockney scamp, which I mean that's far too close to me. And then I was playing like a it was a gnome wizard obsessed with like fire magic, but like again really sort of cheerful and that. And all the characters, they always end up kind of cheerful and talkative, because that's just kind of who I am, unfortunately.
Well, it's easy to easy to play. So you said you said you ran a Games Workshop store. Was that your in to the Games Workshop world?
Yeah.
Was that how you started with Games Workshop?
So I mean, I've been playing the game since I was a kid, But then
what did you start with? Fantasy or 40K?
So it was Hero Quest.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, people of a certain age, that's just the answer, right? That's what they all say. Hero Quest, Space Crusade.
Yep.
Then dropped out of it for a few years. Then saw a friend at school with a White Dwarf magazine. I was like, I recognize Space Marines. They're cool. And picked up. I've still got that first issue, and like, it's falling apart because I've gone through it so much. And I got into 40K for a little bit. Got into a few Space Marine things. The standard kind of 12-year-old kid, like I want one of those and one of those and one of those. I don't care what they do. They look so cool.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah.
And then because like I didn't have the money available to kind of go all out on big armies. So I would pick things that I could use in multiple ways. So like, for example, I ended up playing like Necromunda because I could reuse those models in like an Imperial Guard army in 40K. Or like I played Gorka Morka because I had an Orc army. I never got into Epic or Inquisitor until way later. I played a load of Inquisitor later on, but because there were different scales, or Blood Bowl because you couldn't use football players in a war game, So it was all kind of very. I have to do these things so I can make the most out of my money that I get to spend on it.
Well, yeah, the models are so expensive. I mean, for a high schooler as me, it was. I lucked out, and one of the toy stores, one of the KB Toys, had on clearance like copies of like Space Crusade and Mutant Chronicles, Siege of the Citadel.
Okay, yes.
So I bought like 4 of each of those because they were so cheap, and just kind of like made an army out of that stuff. And
I mean, that's the fun. I mean, this is like total like old man yells at cloud territory here, but I think one of the things that's kind of been lost from the Games Workshop hobby in particular is everything is so prescribed now. Like everything that exists in the game is a product you can buy in the store.
Yeah.
You kind of lose a bit of this, like make your own terrain out of old boxes and things, and here's a few units that don't have models for them. Maybe make them out of something else, or here's some random monsters and things. And I understand why that isn't the case anymore. And I love the fact that you can go in and get everything you want. But that kind of DIY ethic has kind of gone a little bit from it, a little bit of that punk rock thing, which the whole thing was born out of in the first place.
Yeah.
It's kind of gone by the wayside. But that's the corporates, right? Corporations.
Yeah, but anything punk rock eventually gets taken over, right? You can't be punk rock forever. There
was someone, was it Johnny Rotten? I think Sex Pistols was a few years ago. He was doing adverts for like butter.
Oh
yeah, man, what's happened to you?
I think I think Johnny Rotten recently defended the Queen, and I was like,
What
do
is
you
going on?
remember? Do you remember your songs, dude?
Oh, was God Save the was that not ironic? What,
Yeah, exactly.
we assumed sarcasm when there was no sarcasm, didn't we? That was the issue.
Yep.
Oh yeah, but yeah. So anyway, so I got into Games Workshop games. Then when I was about 18, 19, I dropped out of university. I started a degree in linguistics, which I enjoyed in theory, but not enough to actually stick with it. You know.
Yeah.
Dropped out, got a job part-time, my local Games Workshop store. And what's great is it was a guy called Gary running it. He was there when I was a kid. He employed me. He's still there now. Like, I'm pretty
Nice.
certain the town was built around him. He's just been there eternal, you know. But he gave me a job, and I was this kind of 18-year-old, wide-eyed, long-haired. My hair's averaged out throughout my life, kind of guy. And I was just my eyes were opened to the enormity of this hobby and like all the different things you could do with it.
Yeah, I know.
Suddenly you're meeting people who are like, oh, I'm doing this crazy project. It's like, oh, that's really cool. That's amazing. I want to see that. I want to see that. You know.
Yeah, I know. Like you know, I mean, well, Games Workshop has a troubled what is it? Reputation these days, and maybe rightfully so. I mean, you know, there's good and bad, but back in the day, they were one of the only. I mean, it was one of the major entry points into the hobby. And
I mean, Games Workshop brought D&D to the UK. We wouldn't have had it, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
They were formative in so many ways. And what's interesting is you look at like 2000 AD, which is like a British comic book imprint. There's so much crossover in kind of the style. A lot of the artists from 2000 AD came and did a lot of stuff at Games Workshop. A lot of the same kind of ethic, the kind of sticking it to the man, doing things a bit weirdly, doing this kind of whole crazy and anarchic thing. And it's just, as everything does, it gets popular and the rough edges get kind of sanded smooth. And I think, like you said, I think that it's a company that I won't go into it in great detail here. That's not what we're here to talk about. I've certainly got some opinions that I've occasionally made on Twitter, you know, made quite clear on Twitter, and have had some messages from friends who still work there saying,
hey, yeah.
Yeah. And it's difficult because, like, to me, like, there's the edifice of Games Workshop, and I'm in there and I'm shouting at the people at the top of the edifice and going, this is what the hell. And to my friend who's still working there, it looks like I'm just like throwing mud at the building itself, which they're in, and it's like, hopefully they understand that that's not what I mean by it. But at the end of the day, it's they've created this whole universe that has brought so many people so much joy over so much time, and you've got to give them some credit for that, right?
100. I mean, even in a roundabout way, they're what got me completely into this hobby. First with the even though it's not Games Workshop, but the Fighting Fantasy books, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. I mean, they were Games Workshop, and then Talisman, and at the time, Talisman was really one of the only fantasy board games. You had Talisman and maybe Magic Realm. I'm not familiar with the history of Magic Realm, but that might be, there's a couple, probably Avalon Hill, like more fantasy battle games.
Fantasy, and there were quite a few like fantasy themed family games that weren't really hobby games. They were kind of like your board games with a dragon on it kind of thing.
Yeah, but Talisman is like, okay, I'm a character. I can get weapons, I can get armor, I can go and fight monsters, and it's a board game that I don't have to learn a ton of rules. And like that was really like
self-contained. It's like it's one thing, and that's it. Apparently, in Poland, I learned this a few years ago. Poland, Talisman is like Monopoly. Like every family has a copy on their shelf.
Yeah, have you seen like the art from
it's that Fighting Fantasy game book style kind of artwork? It's
very different. Yeah, it's a very different art style. Yeah, I have like a whole digital copy of the files of the Polish Talisman. Yeah.
When so Tom Pike, who did Escape the Dark Castle, Themeborn.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if you've played it, right? He was saying,
my top 10.
Yeah, there you go. We started out at the same kind of time with our companies, and we were in the same town, so we saw each other a lot, and we're still good friends. He was saying when they put that on Kickstarter, they got so many messages from Polish fans of like Talisman who were like, "This looks like my childhood. This is amazing."
Very cool.
Which is kind of how it really took off, I think.
That is super. So like the legacy. There's this legacy aspect of Games Workshop, and they kind of broke that legacy when they moved into Age of Sigmar, and you kind of came in with Silver Tower, which was like this post Age of Sigmar game, but you came in with one foot in the past as well.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about with Silver Tower?
Yeah.
How did you feel about designing a game that was a spiritual follow-up to such a game with such a strong legacy? Like, what was that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So when I joined the studio, I was there at the very tail end of the tail of the comet, if you will, of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So I worked on the very last like End Times book before the world blew up. And things. And then I was there for like a lot of the development of not the core rules for Age of Sigmar, but like we wrote like 1 million like compendiums, all the different things to like give people the rules for the units they had in their armies. And then then I got onto Silver Tower. So it was interesting because I'm trying to think of the exact timeline of it. I mean, this is going back. I don't want to think how many years this is now. It's you know, we've got a 6-year-old, and like everything since then is kind of good luck finding any information in the front of that book.
2016.
Okay,
copyright.
So
copyright 2016. So
in fact, yes. So it was released 2016 because that's when I just it came out after I'd moved to the other studio in Games Workshop where I was now working on specialist games. But so it would have been designed 2014, 2015-ish, so 7 or 8 years ago. But I can't remember if Age of Sigmar had come out when I started working on it. I think it had just about, because I mean it wasn't a long timeline. When I look back at the times I had to like design these games at Games Workshop, and I compare it to what I give myself now to design a game, it's amazing that anything got done. Have you played Gore Chosen? It's the arena combat kind of thing. It's like Khorne champions on a hex. There you go, perfect. 2 weeks. That was done in 2 weeks, including playtesting. And so my last 2 weeks in that studio before I moved on. But I think Silver Tower was about 3.5 months all told. And the main thing I remember from it was when we first started it out, it wasn't Warhammer Quest.
Oh, really?
It was the Silver Tower because there
was just the Silver Tower.
Because there was a question that there's the app game, Warhammer Quest app game. And there were questions about like, can we still make a Warhammer Quest game, or have they got the? And the answer was going to be yes, but they had to kind of check the details of that. But like, whatever the case, it's going to be Warhammer Quest. People are going to hold it up against Warhammer Quest because it's a Warhammer game. It's in a dungeon, you know.
It's a dungeon crawl. It has tiles. It has cards.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, although the tiles and cards, that was so. What I had, the initial brief was, here's a big box of miniatures. Go make us a game. That was kind of the thing, and that was always the way with Games Workshop. The miniatures would get sculpted completely by the miniature studio, which is a completely separate thing. We didn't have access. We weren't allowed to go in there. It's all under NDA, and then it would come to us with a completed. Here's a bunch of stuff. Make some rules for it. And it may have changed now. That's how it was then. And so we got this box of miniatures, and it almost feels like I don't know if you like. We used to have a TV show here called Ready Steady Cook, and it was a daytime TV show, cooking program, and they'd be given a set of ingredients. Go make a meal with this.
Okay.
Yeah. And
right.
it was like that. It's like, what can you make with these miniatures? And you know, some things were like, so we know that we're going to have 2 sets of this sprue, which is like the generic monster sprue, and 1 set of this, which is the hero sprue. So, but the Skaven assassins on the monster sprue, so you're gonna get 2 of them. So how are we gonna make that work in the rules? And ended up with the whole thing where he kind of does the anime ninja
into 2.
But so that was that, and the whole thing was, here's the thing: we want to make a dungeon crawling game. That's what the brief was for the miniatures team. Off you go. And it's like, well, people are immediately going to say this is Warhammer Quest, so you've got to be faithful to that. Now, it turned out Warhammer Quest, I didn't mention it earlier, but that was one of the ones that I got really heavily into because, again, you could reuse all the miniatures from that and other things.
It was like the ultimate version of that. I mean, you could use anything you had in that game.
And you could play with a group of friends, not just 2 of you at once, but you could all, because we only had 1 table, me and my buddies, to play with at once. We didn't have big houses, so we're all getting around that 1 table. And rather than 2 of us going to play a game, the other 2 are going to stand by and wait for them to be finished. We could all play at once, you know. And I was like, well, this has got to live up to that, because if not, I mean, people are going to be really like pissed off, whatever the case. I will not forgive myself if it sucks, you know, because that.
Well, the thing is like people. I mean, some people were upset because like all you ever. I mean, a lot of people here. I just want a reprint of the original. Why can't they just reprint the original? And I'm always like, well, the original exists, and now this exists too.
like
let's enjoy both.
Aware, unless policy has changed, Games Workshop aren't sending out death squads to take down people who are playing the old rules. I mean, again, it's been a weird couple of years. Who can say what's happened since I was there? But as far as I'm aware, that's not happening. You can totally still play the old one. I mean, and the thing is, like when I did it, one of my first, I always start a project with a big like research, like deep dive. And I went through loads of forums and things, and you know all this. Look, what did people love about Warhammer Quest? Because I know why I liked it. What does everyone else love about it? And not a single person at any point mentioned the mechanics. The game mechanics, honestly, with the greatest love to Andy Jones, who I've worked with since, who designed it. It was very much of its time. It was very straightforward. It's that noise you just made. That is how I would describe the rules for Warhammer Quest.
Yeah, it's like it's okay. The rules are okay.
The rules exist. Yeah. I've recently been replaying it, or I started replaying it with my daughter. So she's been looking at the game. She loves her board games. She's got a whole board game shelf of her own. She loves coming into the office and like playing with components, making her own games up. And she's been looking at Warhammer Quest. I was like, "Well, do you want to play it? We'll give it a go." It's just boring, you know. It's very like, well, I'll roll the dice, and I've missed, and you know, I'll move 3 turns in a row because I need to get over to that side of the board now, and so on and so forth. So this research showed me that no one cared about the rules. What they cared about was the stories.
The stories you made up while you were
playing. Amazing moments. Yeah. Those things, you know, no one says, and then I rolled a 6. You know, what they'll say is that moment where the snotling killed my barbarian, or the moment where we rolled badly on the event table and a bloodthirster turned up, or something like that, right? That was the stuff that people cared about. So I was like, well, we need to replicate that. And then it was next step from that was like, people loved the random, you know, emergence of a dungeon done through cards.
Yeah.
But also people loved having a games master, because the problem with the random deck of cards is you can only play it so many times before it kind of gets a bit stale and samey. So you need to have someone who's running the dungeon to make it kind of, you know, do things. So the question was, can we make the game fill that role without being hugely complex? And then the next kind of step from that was, how do we do that within the constraints of what we've got? Because as well as like saying, here's a big bunch of miniatures, go make a game, it's like, here's also a very slim spec for what you can get in terms of other components. Because Games Workshop is, they miniatures games. The rest of it you have to kind of squeeze in if you're lucky.
Yeah, so that's really interesting you brought that up, because OG original Warhammer Quest is expansive. It's very wide. It's like it's a big sandbox.
Yeah.
Silver Tower, the reason I like it just as much, but in a different way, is because it's very narrow. It's a very narrowly focused game. Was that narrow focus? What came first? The narrow narrative focus, that the story you were trying to create, or was it we can fit this much stuff in a box? Like, what was
they're quite linked, I think, because like, you know, one of the discussions you have early on, you got that meeting, there were like 9 of us in a room, which feels appropriate, 9 being the number of Zinch, you know. We were like, it was like me, there was a project manager, Andy, who wrote the kind of narrative chunks, there was John and Kevin, who did a lot of the artwork. So John did these amazing floor tiles, Kevin did some of the illustrations in the book, and a bunch of other people, like various project manager type people. And we were like, you know, what can this be? But the thing was, well, we can probably give you this many cards, this many dice, this many tokens, you know, this much cardboard. There's like 4 card sheets, whatever it is. And so they then start thinking about, well, within that constraint, also, and of course, there's a scheduler in the room saying, well, you've got 3.5 months. This needs to go to print on this date. And you're like, well, what can we achieve with that? Because I would love, and I would still one day love to go back and do everything but the kitchen sink, the full Warhammer Quest experience. Here's the endless replayable campaign, the sandbox you can go and do in.
Right.
But I've seen a lot of people attempt to do the same kind of thing, and it's worked better than others in some cases. But to me, when you go with a narrow focus, you can craft a better experience, right? And so we were like, well, let's focus on this. So let's make a game which is narrative heavy, because that the story is what matters in these games. People remember the story, so let's make it a story. Let's keep it to a certain number of missions. It's Zinch, which is the thing we knew it was there. So nine is the number of like kind of quests you do, but let's make it mysterious. Let's not make it so you can open the book and see there are 9 missions. Let's have something else. And I've been playing a board game called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yep.
It's like you solve mysteries, and it's like a big numbered paragraph.
Big papers, yeah.
And it kind of goes back again to that kind of fighting fantasy game book, all the choose your own adventure stuff. But the idea of a numbered set of paragraphs, that was literally in that first meeting, I was like, we could do this. And I've got my notebook somewhere, and it was like, I'd written down crazy idea, missions as numbered game book. And it was an insane idea.
Yeah, the adventure book. Yeah.
I wish, I really wish I've got one of my original prototypes, like early prototypes in the office, which I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have.
You probably should have left that at the office.
Yeah, but I've got it's just like a little A4, A5. I've made it in Word, just folded it over, and it was like most of the entries are XXX, But I did like a proof of concept for how the first mission could work, and it's very different to what ended up coming out of it. But it's like it felt cool because you got this book, this mysterious book. It says, "Don't read this until that whatever it says in the front of the book." That was there in that.
Yeah, don't read until instructed. Yeah,
and those words have power, right? I watched a lot of like videos on game design theory and that, and someone was saying a lot of game design is like poetry in that the words you use, the terms you use, everything matters. Everything carries weight.
Oh, so 100%.
Yeah, so like calling a thing rulebook says one thing, calling it guidebook says something else. And I forget what the one in Silver Tower is called. I think is it guidebook?
Yeah, guidebook and adventure book. Yeah. No,
it's the guidebook. It's guiding you into the tower, right?
That's one of the reasons why Silver Tower is in my masterclass series and the main reason why I love Games Workshop so much is because they are a company, and I think you are a designer who really follows that ideal of as soon as the game doesn't start or a customer's experience with the game doesn't start when it's set up on the table. It starts when you're holding the box.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Games Workshop games have awesome feeling boxes. They have great art on the back. They have great covers. When you open them up, they come with like these stupid little things that just cover the minis and the rule books are like really, really nicely put together books, and just they bring you into the experience from the moment you pay a lot of money for the game.
But it's a luxury product, right? But you feel it. You feel that. There's a term which I hate this term, but game feel. I keep seeing this bandied around, and it's like 'cause it comes from the term mouth feel.
Mouthfeel. So I
despise the word mouth feel, but like game feel. The other thing of like that kind of that. You can't really say what exactly it is, but just that feeling of a game, right?
Yeah.
And that to me, GW games tend to really nail that a lot of the time because you have this incredibly kind of talented pool of people. I mean, there are people there who've been working in that studio for 20, 30 years who just know things. I used to sit on the desk next to Jervis Johnson, who's written countless games, and he just has this like understanding of how games work. I would go to him and go, Jervis, I'm hitting my head against the wall. I can't make this thing work. What the hell do I do? And he'd look at it and explain it to me, and he'd sit there very quietly and go, change that thing. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, everything now is brilliant. It's I've always said like he sees games like Matrix code. He just sees exactly.
Stuff falling down.
Yeah, so that's it. And it's amazing.
Whose idea was it? So you were just talking about memorable moments, and many of the memorable moments in Silver Tower come from those little like almost dexterity games. I tell people, okay, in Silver Tower there is a game of charades, and like that was so when we first came across that, we were just like,
I always ask people, did you drink the potion?
Yes, and we were like, oh my god, this is so cool. I've never seen this in a dungeon crawl before. Like this kind of like bringing in almost a party game element to a few of the entries. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things. So at the time, actually, I think that question has made me place where this game was, because when Age of Sigmar first came out, there was this push to again, I'm not going to go into huge detail, but Games Workshop the design studio and Black Library, which was like the publishing wing, did all the novels and things, had merged. So that they'd been brought into one studio. Only lasted about 3 years, but in that time, that's when Age of Sigmar kind of happened. And there was this big push to make everything like more narrative, get rid of kind of game speak. I've always talked. The Games Workshop pendulum is a thing. So at the moment they're very rulesy tournament, organized play. At that point they were very narrative, fluffy. Everything is long-winded sentences. You look at the way Age of Sigmar is written, and it is so overwrought. And that was such a challenge, trying to fit rules into a small box when you've got to say everything in this overblown way. But when we did the compendiums of rules for units and things, and like the scenarios, we were trying to just kind of be more interesting with it. And we were breaking down the idea of what you can ask a player to do. So as opposed to kind of, because it got to a point where a lot of the games were like, well, this thing means you re-roll rolls of 1. This thing lets you re-roll any dice. This one gives you an extra dice to roll, which has kind of come back to now in 40K especially. But it was like, can we make things more interesting? Let's just, let's lean into the narrative. Let the narrative lead the way. And so we thought, well, this is, so Silver Tower, it's this kind of mind-bending, trippy, like it's part of the labyrinth, part kind of stuff. There's a whole spoilers for like a 8-year-old game, whatever it is.
That's fine.
One of the quests where you go through it, then you go back through it in reverse, and the world starts exploding behind you. That is totally the bit in the labyrinth where David Bowie throws the little globe thing and it explodes, the world shatters. But like the whole idea was, how can we make the players feel like they're being sucked into it? And they are part of this. And part of it was like the rule book tells you to read it as you play your first thing. You are being pulled into it with the characters. And then these little things happen. There are lots of little nods. Like one of the events is the game pieces realize they're just pieces in a game.
They're pieces in a game. I love that. Like I love that kind of that meta shit. It's just
and like the dexterity tests, like all the little sort of like you can get the treasure if you can take the card off the deck without disturbing the dice. It just kind of came out of that whole thing we were doing. Like there's a few of the things in the original Age of Sigmar battle plans, which are like the scenario things, where you're doing like random little mini games in the middle of a thing. You're going to try to like bluff your opponent or whatever. There was one. Go on.
Did they incorporate any of that stuff into Age of Sigmar? Like, were any of the powers in Age of Sigmar like you had to close your eyes to move units, or you had to stand on one foot?
Yes. So I think it went a bit weird in Age of Sigmar. So what happened was with a lot of these compendiums, so the idea was it was the get you by rules, so you can play with your existing models before the official rules come out. A lot of those had things in them. Like there were a couple of us who were trying really hard to kind of make interesting things. So there's my favorite one, which I don't think ever made it into print. I think it got edited out in the end. But there's one of the Chaos Gods, Slanesh, is all about like temptation and excess. And one of the Lord characters had a rule which I put in, which was, after an enemy character within 6 inches, 6 is the number of Slanesh, makes attacks, you can offer them the chance to roll some more dice and make some more attacks. And you can do this as many times as you like. If at any point they roll a number they've already rolled, their character is slain immediately. Because that's temptation and excess.
And push your luck mechanism that I love in a game. And like this whole kind of, this thing. But what happened was they started getting silly, and some of the things in the compendiums turned into things like, if you're the dwarf thing, if you have a bigger beard than your opponent, re-roll this dice. If you can insult your opponent's model, roll this dice. And that came out, and it got such a backlash because it crossed the line from like interesting into silly. And so I can guarantee we wrote these before that backlash happened. So it must have been like before Age of Sigmar had come out. But certainly, I mean, like for me, having some of those little dexterity challenges was just a way of kind of making it feel like it wasn't your bog standard board game. You're in a different world. And I still to this day have not seen another dungeon crawl really that incorporates a game of charades or some elements of stacking dice to
there's a riddle. Did you encounter a riddle? Like my first is in this, my second's in that. Because what's great as well, because of the way the board comes out, people might never see, I think, on a playthrough. So replaying the game, you'll see things you've never seen before. I've
played through the campaign I think twice. And the second time, I don't think I came across the charades, I don't remember how I originally triggered that moment. I am so glad though that I did experience that that event with a group, because my second time through I played solo, and it would have been.
I find it interesting, because I mean so there was a deliberate decision during the design process that this was a 2 to 4 player game,
right?
Because it's, as you know, it's fully playable solo, but we wanted to put in things, because if we'd made it so that it was a 1 to 4 player game, then you have to make sure that everything works when you're solo. So that stops working. The one, I think, it's like a thing where the characters fight each other in one thing. There's various little things where you have, there's one where like you can all vote for a thing, something thumbs up, thumbs down, and it's like we could have not done that. So what we said was, we'll call it a 2 to 4. People will still play it solo, but we've not said that this is how it's designed. And that was kind of, so, because to me the game is in the shared experience. That's what we lent into with it. Like, this is a shared experience that you will share at the table, and it will be a cool thing to do.
And one of the reasons, another reason why that works so well is because of that narrow focus. You can play it in like 4 or 5 sessions. I have a lot of, I just reviewed, or not reviewed, but just took a detailed look at like a Stars of Icarios, and it's a great game. It's fantastically designed, but it's a 50+ hour campaign game that's going to stretch on 2 or 3 months. And that's just really hard to do. But Silver Tower, I could get a group of people together, say, hey, in a month, in 4 Saturdays, we could go through the entire game of Silver Tower and play it multiple times.
And also that narrow focus meant we could focus on things like there's loads of little nods towards Tzeentch in it. Like you've got the because you've got this very like clear narrative. There's things like, so most of the board sections have eyeballs hidden on them. You wanted the idea that, like, this is John the artist. He had this thing of like, well, the gaunt someone is always watching you. So there are eyeballs hidden in loads of pieces. The number of passages in the book, I believe, is 88, I think, or is it 90? But it had to be a multiple of 9. I was
90.
Like, 90. So it's multiple of 9. The thing that bugs me the most about that game, there's a few things. There's a lot of typos in it. There's a lot of errata. The rulebook is horribly written. Like, I look back at myself and I weep. But the worst thing, the renown wheel, the wheel with where you track your experience.
Oh yeah.
It's got 10 spaces.
It's got 10. Yeah, I remember. I think I've read you say that before. You said, why wasn't it 9? Yeah.
And the worst thing was, I noticed this like in late playtesting before it went across. I sent the wrong file to the artist.
Oh no.
And I was like, I can't, because he's done such a lovely job. I can't. It's too, and especially because there's like alternating colors around it, so that would mess that up. I was like, I'm just gonna have to eat that one,
That one.
It happens.
Try again.
All those little things that kind of just let you lean into that flavor and really, and this is, I mean, like these days with RPGs, TTRPGs and that, I much prefer a game that is incredibly specific, to one that is like, oh, this game lets you play anything. Let me, tell me what the game's about.
Mm-hmm.
Have that kind of, again, that poetry thing. Tell me the words for the different skill tests you can make. Well, tell me the kind of game you've given me to play.
Yeah.
And that's what I think what Silver Tower was.
Yeah. So I know you weren't involved with Hammerhall, right? Shadowware Hammerhall, Blackstone Fortress, Cursed City, but those games all stem from Silver Tower. So it's kind of like we have this new legacy of Warhammer Quest. And I don't know, do you have any feelings on just how does that feel to have like kind of started this?
It's lovely. Honestly, I love it. I love the fact that like this, it's like I laid some eggs, and now I've watched them all hatch. And leave the nest. Yeah. So Hammerhall was basically, as far as I'm aware, it was kind of a reaction to the good response to Silver Tower. They're like, well, let's get another game out, and it was again made in quite a short space. But it was done by Jervis. So Jervis Johnson did it, and he'd made so many games. Like he'd made Advanced Hero Quest, which was one of the things that like inspired this. So it was lovely to kind of see what he would do with it, and he made some fantastic changes to the rules to the point where I would recommend bringing the way wound dice work in that back in Silver Tower. Because like you keep them between, like I forget how it works. There's something like you can never fully recover once you're dead or something. There's a whole something goes on.
It was a little harder, to recover. I don't remember the exact thing, but yeah.
And they didn't do the whole kind of adventure book thing, but I don't blame them, because I mean I look back at the spreadsheets I was making when I was trying to figure that out, because you're not just trying to fit all the content in, you're trying to make everything fit on a page. And part of that came down to me saying to Andy, the writer, like, Andy, you've got 3 lines, and I need exactly 3 lines of text for this to say this thing, or I need 5 lines, or you've got between 4 and 7, between these 4 paragraphs, you know. But also, like, you don't want, if you've got, because there are 2-part entries, like this is this one, and then the next thing, you know, it'll give you a choice, and you go to this page or this page.
Yeah.
They can't be on facing pages because you can't have a thing. Yeah. And if you've got like the start of a quest, I didn't want to have the end of a quest on the same page, because again, you might see some similar words, and I might just be drawn across. So I can't blame them for not doing that with Hammerhall. They went with a much more traditional GM thing, but also there've been people who've been asking for it. People wanted to have a game where you could play it, you know, 1 versus many.
Yeah, it's a good it's a good setup. I don't like 1 versus many, just because I don't get the opportunity to play them as much.
I always end up being the one in those situations.
But Hammerhall is a fun one, and we have, and again, it's narrowly focused. You have 8 floors of a dungeon. You're going to go through those 8 floors, so you can get through it in you know, a handful of sessions. And
I've not played that. I've not played Blackstone Fortress, which again I've heard is very good. I heard it kind of takes that kind of idea and just it develops it in a few ways. I like the idea of the like instances, like you have smaller like missions that you do, and then you kind of pop out and do some stuff, and that's quite cool. That's neat. I like that. Custom dice, because, you know, suddenly they had a budget. And then Cursed City is like I look at Cursed City and I think, if I'd had that kind of level of like budget for components and things, I can't imagine what I would have done.
Yeah, Cursed City is kind of like again an evolution on Blackstone Fortress in a way. Yeah.
But I've not played any of them, because honestly, like I when I was working there and I was at 50% staff discount, I look at the prices and go, well, that's a bit steep, but I can probably just about manage it. And now it's like, no, that's not going to happen.
I know.
And then, to be fair, like, you know, I had to buy my own copy of Warhammer Quest Silver Tower. They don't give out free copies to anyone. So I was like, I'm lucky I have that one, but I was like, I can't not have a copy of that. So I've not had the other ones though. But it's lovely watching the evolution happen. And you know, you can look at a thing and go, I wouldn't have done that necessarily, but it's cool what they've done. Or most of the time it's like, that's a really cool idea and I wish I'd thought of that.
yeah. So then not too long after Silver Tower, maybe Hellboy, and I'm not sure where Needy Cat Games fits in this, but your partner Sophie Williams, and you two work on Hellboy. So one thing that is like combining these 2 games or connecting these 2 games is one thing I talk about on the Dungeon Dive lot is rulebook size, like managing a size of a rulebook that you can hold in your hand and easily read. You know, you've got this, but Hellboy is the perfect size rulebook. Game designers, make your rulebooks the size of a comic book. There's a reason why comic books are this size, because they are so comfortable to read and hold. They don't flop over. You can put them on the table and they don't take up a quarter of your table space. So
I can hear you not mentioning any games by name here. I can feel it happening.
Something deep, something lost in deep, perhaps.
But some people just really enjoy the kind of gentleman reading a copy of the Times, you know, effect. Maybe it's a spying thing. You put the eye holes in and, you know, read a little bit while.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, I think constraint is a really important thing in any kind of design. You know, having even setting yourself a rule and saying, I'm going to make this rule book fit in 32 pages on comic book size paper. That's always helpful, right? Not having constraint can lead to some dark times indeed. But yeah, so Hellboy came about. So after I left Games Workshop, I set up Needy Cat. It was initially just myself. After about 6 months, my partner Sophie came on board because I had this huge pile of work. She was working as an archaeologist. She'd been in the Games Workshop studio. She was a scheduler and she helped like run all the artists. She worked in licensing for a bit. She then was made redundant from there, worked as an archaeologist because she'd done it years previously. And it came to the end of summer and she was like, being outside digging kind of sucks in the autumn.
And it is, yeah.
And I was like, well, actually, I've got more work that I know what to do with. Do you want to come on? And so she came on, and the next 9 months was her writing all the missions for the Hellboy Kickstarter expansions, all the case files.
Wow. Okay, so I was going to ask you if you had input into the expansion, because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So, like,
so that whole first wave, basically, I did the core game engine and the 4 main characters and that. And then Sophie basically did all the. I think I did 2 case files in the core game, and Sophie did the other 4 plus all the expansions. And then, I mean, it goes back and forth. So she was testing the stuff that I was doing. I was testing stuff she was doing. But we've always worked that kind of collaborative way because we've worked together in the past as well. And so yes, we worked on Hellboy then. And as of about 6 months ago, Sophie is no longer with Needy Cat. She got headhunted. She's now running the game design department at Modifius, who make other awesome games.
Yeah.
And she's now got an awesome team of people that she's kind of leading to make more cool things. But it means I'm now back. Needy Cat is just me again, and the cat, who is still needy.
He's still needy.
But Hellboy was kind of interesting because Hellboy was like the original pitch for it was very straightforward. It was like, take the Star Saga engine, which is a game that Mantic had done previously, and reskin it for Hellboy. And I was like, well, no, let's take something. Let's make something fresh, you know?
Yeah, very different than Star Saga. Thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think I'm a theme first designer. So I look at Hellboy, and I've read like 25 years worth of comics in a short space of time. I've read a thing from a reporter once, which is like when you're investigating a story, you become the world expert on that story for like a fortnight, and then you forget it entirely. Yeah. And I did the same. I went deep dive on Hellboy, learn all the things I can, and then once it's done, I never need this information again. Awesome, it's out the way. But like, we wanted to make a thing which felt like the way the comics do, and it was the same sort of thing. And it was interesting because it was a lot of the same kind of stuff. So they went, here's a bunch of miniatures we've made for the core game, so you go make a game around this. It felt very Games Workshop in the same way, because Mantic
is kind of a miniatures company as well.
So Ronnie, who set up Mantic, he used to run the Games Workshop studios. There's a lot of kind of similar practices happening there. So it was like, how do we make this game? And one of the things I wanted to do was get that kind of feeling of slow burn investigation with like punchy action.
A big punch of action. Yeah.
And it's interesting because a lot of the ideas from Silver Tower were then kind of evolved further. So there's the idea of like the respite or the resting in Hellboy, which is, to me, that came from the idea that in a game like D&D, you have two modes of time, right? Yep. You've got your kind of action fight scene. The Final Fantasy VII camera spins inwards and the battle starts, but then you've also got the kind of much more slow burn, you can take your time and investigate. And in Hellboy, the way that kind of came through was you have the ability to take your time, reposition yourselves around the board, pick up any clues. It's all loosey-goosey, but then you're spending that kind of resource, the time that you've got.
The time,
and I'm sure that there are other things which kind of feel like they're inspired by Silver Tower as well,
Well, the iconography on the tiles or the cards that go into certain case files are kind of like the icons on the But like, this symbol goes with these three cases, or this symbol goes with those cases.
And it comes from that thing of wanting to use every component in more than one way wherever possible. So rather than having an individual card for each thing, here's a bunch of cards that can be shuffled up, and they will go into one of these missions. And you might see a one you've had before, but it will come through in a different context or whatever,
Right.
And I think, it's interesting. And then the other thing, of course, is kind of the modularity, that kind of replayability, dealing out cards to see where things are. And we originally experimented with having like the Silver Tower style exploration where you're dealing out one room at a time. But in the whole process of making up how the case files work, we have like a deck you work through. It became a lot easier to just have like, here's one setup, because it's slightly fewer moving parts.
Well, also, I go back and forth on those laying out tiles randomly, because on one hand, it's really fun to get that sense of exploration.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you never know exactly how much room you're going to need on a table.
Descent Legends in the Dark. Oh my goodness.
It's like, okay, I'm starting here, and then all of a sudden I'm like spread out on three different little tables. Like, okay.
Although I have been told, so I've complained about that before, and someone has told me that the new Descent has a thing where when you first set it up, if you zoom out, there is like a grey box showing you the rough
size of like what you will need.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. But it's still, those kind of games, designers need to think about how big people's tables are. Right?
we just talked about that on Facebook. I was gonna, and it kind of like how this these new custom giant game tables are kind of like, if you keep building a bigger game table, designers are going to keep making bigger games to fill the tables, right?
So the kind of people that are going to get custom game tables, people that use them all the time. So it's going to be like your high end people that are really, really into their games. And I'm going to be clear, if you've got one of these, fair play to you. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
but also designers, like game designers, the kind of people that might go, hey, you know, I'm a game designer, I love games, I'm going to splash out and get one of these cool tables. And what it means is they've then got this custom lovely area, and they're going to start getting used to having that much space. They're going to forget what it's like to try to play Warhammer Quest on a little coffee table or whatever, you know. And these kind of table hub games, Space Hulk. I can see Space Hulk on the shelf behind you there. Which one is that? Is that 3 or 3.5? Is it one with the
4th edition? I guess I don't know what.
We don't call it 4. 4's a lie.
4th,
it's
3.5.
It's 3 with a new hat. You know.
Yeah,
it's
I love it. I started with 1st edition, but if I could choose any edition, it would be that. I mean, that thing is just like, it's the most overproduced, but just beautiful.
I mean, the embossed. Oh, you know.
The tiles are like a 1/4 inch thick.
Like if you have an intruder in your house, you can just throw Space Hulk tiles at them.
Oh,
you will kill them. But no, they photographed all the it's not necessarily artwork. The board tiles, they made them and then photographed them and then like added graphics.
It's just such a beautiful production.
It's incredible. But Space Hulk, one of my favorite games. I love it to bits. I will play it. I'm in that point with it though, where I can't just play it against anyone because I've played enough of it that if I play someone who isn't like similarly nerdy about it,
like steamroll,
neither of us will have fun. You know, it's like playing chess against someone at a very different level from you. But there are certain missions I just don't play because I don't happen to have, I don't know, a small airfield to play it on, because that's what you kind of need. And so many designers forget that you need to have, you know, a manageable game. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I do this for a part-time job, but I have a very small hobby room. I have a very small table, and so a lot of times when I get a game in, I'm like, okay, if I can play it on my 3x4 table with one little side table, great. If I can't, I just have to like sell it on or
the Needy Cat office. So we've got a small office. It's not very big. It's about the same size as this room here, and we've got our 2 desks. Even though Sophie's Modifius, she's still in there. I thought that we need to kind of annex a corner of the room maybe to her, but we've got that, and we've got our prototyping table which we play games on, and we were thinking of getting a bigger one because it's literally like a small IKEA table. I was like, no, we keep this one because if we make games on this table, we know people can play them on the majority of
on something they own. So,
yeah. And I think this is the thing that I said on Facebook the other day, which is I would be interested to know how many designers, especially in the past couple of years, when, you know, playtesting has moved more online and using Tabletop Simulator has become more normal, how many designers have taken a game to like almost finished without ever having made a physical prototype? Because you get the feeling like some games, it's like, well, you've got all these great ideas, but you've not stopped and thought, actually, how big is this thing? This is just, because as a player, I want to be able to kind of reach everything, right? I want everything within arm's reach. I don't want to have to like have the croupier
stand up not one of those generals in World War II, like
exactly. And also around. Yeah, and what was the one? Was it Awaken Realms did a game about dreaming, and I don't know if you're familiar with that stuff. Etherfield. That's the one, where you have this like information on tiny cards that is over there, and you have to all be able to see it at all times.
The board in that game, first of all, 100% not needed, because you don't play on anything on the board. The board is just holding the stuff.
There's a few of those lately.
And Bard Song. Bard Song, I literally cannot play that game. It looks amazing. It's up in my attic right now because it's like, okay, do I keep it and hope maybe one day I get a bigger table? I really want to play that game because I think it looks good, but I folded out that board and it makes no sense. It hangs over like 3 edges of my table. It's a low res image blown up.
I can't help thinking, like, this is Spinal Tap, the Stonehenge set. Yeah. Oh, someone got inches and feet mixed up or something. Yeah. Or like, you know, and this is the wrong size.
And just the I don't know. Yeah, that game baffles me so much. The design choice of having the board be the limitation of your dungeon and how you can reach different points. I'm just like, is that better than just having a card shuffled into the last 3 cards of your dungeon deck? It's just really weird.
It's one of those weird choices, isn't it? You look at it and you think, like, a lot of the time I look at a thing and I try to enjoy games without thinking like, how is this sausage being made? You know, I try to just enjoy the game. But sometimes you look at a thing and you think, well, actually, what you've done is you've come up with a thing which is a solution to a problem that you could have headed off by going back like 3 steps and changing something over here, and then you're not having to kind of have the problem with a patch on the end of it. You can actually rework it. And I mean, so much of game design is paring things down and making things simpler. That's like the discipline of game design.
No, yeah, I mean that's like I thought that exact same thing with Massive Darkness 2.
I've not played it.
Yeah, so it has this weird role where when you engage with an enemy, the enemy automatically rolls a handful of dice for their counter attack.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take into consideration that maybe that enemy doesn't have ranged weapons.
Oh no.
And
okay.
so it's just to simulate a skirmish that's happening. So you could fire off an arrow at a group of minions, but be hurt by their counterattack.
Oh no, yeah, okay.
And so I get what they were going for, like to try to keep things dangerous, but it feels like they were like, okay, we have this problem where as a ranged character it can take out these enemies. So how can we patch that problem? Well, we'll just throw in some dice where the enemies can retaliate from any range, and it breaks the game for me. I just don't.
Whereas actually, instead, you could go, well, actually, how do we make ranged attacks less effective, or how do we change the engagement distance, or whatever it might be,
or just the way games have done it forever is just make ranged characters weaker. Where if they get attacked, they die in 1 or 2 hits. You know, I mean,
your ranged character is so we did a few months ago. We had a game on what was it? Last month before, had a game on Kickstarter called Steel Coliseum, which is like an arena combat. It's like Gore Chosen has definitely the DNA's filtered through from that. It's a robot fighting combat game. But the way we got around that in that, we had like ranged weapons be quite rare, and whenever you attack another robot, you knock some of their armor off into the arena, and then anyone can pick that up, and it's used as a currency. It's scrap that becomes a currency. So ranged attacks, you're out of harm's way, but you knock their armor off, and then they can probably pick it up before you can. And it was like, when we come at that, it's like, oh, that's such a nice way of balancing that, because it means a shooty robot can still be powerful, but it becomes a tactical choice now. Well, do I want to give them some money by shooting them from afar, or do I close in? And I think that's it. It's like, don't go with your first thought. Develop that idea and think about, well, how else can we approach this problem?
Yeah.
And but I think that's true of any kind of creative endeavor, right? Like, you need to hack away at a thing and make it good. And I think especially with like some of the really big Kickstarter games you see, you just get the feeling they've kind of got excited, thrown everything in and gone, yeah, it's done.
Well, James Hawthorne, you know, the designer of Mice and Mystics.
Jerry.
Jerry. Yeah. We talk quite often, and he once said something to me that really stuck with me. And he said a lot of game players are really good at finding the thing that's wrong with a game, but they're really bad at figuring out how to fix that problem. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of these very inexperienced Kickstarter developers who came to this design world as a game player, and they were, okay, these are all the things I don't like about games, but they're not good at figuring out what they didn't like and how to fix the problems that they. And that's the thing with house rules, right? Like, I know I'm really good at finding the things I don't like about games, and then I'll say, okay, I want to do this instead, but then that breaks that, and then just it's really hard to find the actual issue with, and that's where somebody like is Needy Cat. Do you guys do consultation?
Definitely
with designers and.
Yeah, so we do a whole thing. I'm not booking anything at the moment because I'm so busy. Because let's say Sophie's gone off and got another job, so I'm having to pick up all the slack.
Yeah.
Realized just how much she was doing, you know, the moment she left. But like we have like a consultancy thing, and we work with people who have got a game. The simplest form of it we do is like a rulebook review, which is they'll give us their rulebook. We say,
so
let's
important.
Read through it and make sure things are in the right order and things aren't repeated and things are clear and using the right kind of terminology, and we help them put together an index or a glossary, whatever it might be, you know. But also, with people, I've got some people who are doing like a miniature skirmish game, and I'm currently having a back and forth with them where they're kind of giving me, well, here's the latest version. What do you think of this? And so I do a fair bit of that. And I think it's an interesting thing to do. I enjoy that kind of side of it, because one of the things that I learned through Games Workshop is I spent a lot of time helping other people develop stuff, because we had a very close-knit team, 4 people, and anything we did would be read and reviewed by 2 other people in the team. And so you got very used to kind of reading through stuff and trying to get it as good as it can be. And again, I think you're right. People are coming into this brand new. They play loads of games. They love games. They've got some great ideas, but they haven't got that kind of skill set to kind of go, right, what is the heart of this? What is the thing that needs to stay? What things can be cut away? You know, and it's a thing you develop over time, and it's, I say, so much of it is just taking things out. Like I always have this thing, because I mean I run game design courses online and stuff, and one of the things I always say throughout that is, if something isn't working, it's probably because there's too much faff in there. So take out your favorite thing, the thing that you as a designer are really proud of and you really like. Take it out, because chances are you're trying to be clever, and clever very rarely makes for fun games. So take that thing out and see what happens. And 9 times out of 10, you'll realize, oh, this is this is the thing. Are you familiar with the term of the fantasy heartbreaker? This is a thing from like mid 90s, maybe late 80s, D&D clone game. So like people would go, I'm going to release, is when D&D became an open license thing.
Right.
Go, I'm going to make my own version of D&D. But what I'm going to do, I really, really, really care about medieval crossbows. That's my kind of passion in life. So here's my version of D&D, which has got a slightly changed setting and 3 chapters on how crossbows should actually work. Yeah. And they feel like, for me personally, this one thing isn't right. So here's a whole load of stuff to fix it. And so you have this kind of, rules complexity. Whoa, crossbows. Yeah. And they were called fantasy heartbreakers because they'd get a small print unpublished and they would just sit in the middle of their garden or something, on a pallet, eroding away slowly because no one wanted them.
And not doing anything with them.
Funnily enough, that isn't how you fix D&D. And you see it everywhere now. I think it's the thing. The number of games I've seen that are, this is the new Warhammer Quest. And I'm not just saying that because I mean the original Warhammer Quest. This is people who say we're going to make the new original Warhammer Quest sandbox, and it's like, yeah, but why was it good?
Yeah.
Why did it matter? What did people take away from it? And I think people don't ask that question quickly enough. People zoom in too quickly. They get to mechanically, what are we going to do? It's like, no, think about the feelings. What's the tone? What are you making your player go through when they sit down to play? And nail that, and everything else will follow.
Yeah.
Which is the thing that Jerry gets right. Like, I love it. Mice and Mystics was on the rulebook for that was on my desk the whole time I was doing Silver Tower. I've just sent him a copy of Hellboy because we talked about it about 18 months ago. I was like, I'm going to send you a copy of Hellboy because he hadn't played it.
He hadn't played it yet.
No, and then 18 months passed, and I was like, oh, I haven't sent that to Jerry. Whoops. So hopefully he'll have that by the time this video goes out.
Jerry and I have talked a lot about rule books because my review for Aftermath was I really ripped into the rule book on that game, and he knows, and like plaid hat rule books have kind of gone a little downhill because they really want to limit how many pages are in the rule books, and the rule book for Mice and Mystics for Dungeon Run are great.
Yep.
But over the years they've gone fewer and fewer pages, and they're really struggling. And Jerry knows that they're struggling. And I think my review for Aftermath,
it's a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
Writing a rulebook is a whole thing, and I will hold my hand up. The rulebook for Hellboy, I'm not happy with it. Rulebook for Silver Tower, I'm not happy with it. The rulebooks for the game I'm writing right now, not happy with it. I suck at writing rules. I want to get to the point where I can get someone to write them for me, because I feel like I'm a much better game designer than a rules writer.
I put Silver Tower and Hellboy rulebooks up. I think they're pretty good. Like,
they've just got too many words. No, to be fair, Silver Tower doesn't have too many words. Silver Tower has the issue where, because it's an experiential kind of thing, it's nightmarish to look up a rule.
It's
so
not
Silver Tower needs an index.
It's not a good reference.
No.
Reference manual. But
look, a rule book does 3 things. Yeah, it's a teaching aid.
Somebody hasn't seen it. This is what the rule book for Silver Tower is. You kind of work through a few turns of the game while you are learning, and it does a pretty good job of teaching. No, it does a great job of teaching the game. But when you need to remember something, because there's like this one page of
all the bubbles. Oh God, don't do it. Don't show it.
There you go. There's your shining moment.
That's my kryptonite. Yeah, that's the hold that to me. And but no, like to me, like a rule book is it's a teaching aid, it's a rules reference, and it's a storyteller, right? Now to me, that one, it falls down on being a reference. I think it tells the story, it evokes the theme, it holds the player's hand and leads them into it, but it's a terrible rules reference. I think Hellboy does a pretty good job of telling the story. No, it doesn't, because it looks good, but we didn't put enough information in that was about what is Hellboy. And I think the reason for that is when I was at Games Workshop, we had a split. We had game designers and then writers.
And then the writers, yeah.
And I was suddenly flying without a writer, and it never occurred to me, oh, maybe you should write some actual text about who Hellboy is. Well, I would love, like, in hindsight, the backs of the hero agent card would be a great place to say, Hellboy is a big red guy, and he hits things really hard. And Liz Sherman goes on fire sometimes. You know, but, like, yeah, the Hellboy rulebook, I think it's got too many words, and it's quite hard to navigate, I think, once you. But I think the benefit is once you've played the game a couple of times, you don't really need to look much up.
No, it's pretty. Have you played Mantic's Walking Dead? Here's Negan.
So I've someone ran me through a game of it to demonstrate a point once. I've not actually played it properly.
Yeah, that's a great game. That's a really good game. The force of Negan is really clever. I think it's one of those times where like a clever mechanism really worked. How Negan is kind of like this AI controlled part of your party, but being the character of Negan, he's a loose cannon, and he can go off the rails and whack one of your dudes or
No, the Walking Dead games they did were really good. I think they didn't get played enough. I think I've not seen enough people talking about them because they were really cool.
Yeah.
And I was very tempted when they kind of said they're bringing it to an end. I was tempted to kind of just grab a load of stuff, but
yeah,
I don't have time to play games. I mean, I
don't have time to play. No.
So I play as many as I can, but there's a limit.
Yeah. So a few minutes left. What can you tell us a little bit about anything you're working on right now, or?
Let's think.
Is it thematic? Is it something that fans of the Dungeon Dive will?
So, I've just pitched a thing to a company who I've worked with previously, and we're currently discussing it. And it is something which, if it goes well, will be like so zeroed in on the Dungeon Dive target audience that people will be very happy. It's like, you know, just got to nail it all down. But when I explained it, the person I was speaking to, his eyes lit up. He was like, "Oh, that hasn't been done before," which is that's always a nice kind of thing. So that's that, but that'll be like a few years down the line. The main game I can talk about at the moment is a completely nothing to do with Dungeon Dive. It's an abstract tile laying game about gardening, which is it's charming and delightful.
Yeah,
there's very little combat. And frankly, the combat that's in there, I think I need to remove it. It's just shoehorned in.
Are you combating weeds or insects or something?
Yeah, clearly, that's what we need to go with it. You know, invade other people's garden, you know, all that. I've got a game that I posted a prototype of it on TTS. I put it on the group ages ago. It's like it's a single player, solo play, roguelike dungeon crawler, all with dice placement and things. And it's kind of. It basically came out of me playing a load of roguelike video games.
Yep.
So I'm playing Hades, which is an awesome game.
Yeah, Hades is great.
What was the other one? Oh, Heat Signature, FTL, loads of stuff like where you go into a thing, you go, I'm going to do a load of cool stuff, and hey, I died, but I've unlocked a few things. Now I'm going to play it again, and it's that experience. Basically.
Yeah, man, that I really want that. I call that's called kind of like a rogue legacy. I think rogue legacy
roguelike is the term they use.
So, but like that. I think like Rogue Legacy was the first of those games where it was a roguelike, but you kept adding stuff to subsequent plays that you would unlock.
Yeah, there's like a distinction. It's like a roguelike is where a roguelike is where every playthrough is completely distinct.
Yeah. Like
a roguelite with a T is where you can unlock stuff and it adds to your future playthroughs, which is I think the much more popular thing these days because
that's what I like. Right? I like that. It just adds a little bit of spice to each new game, and I wish more board games had that. That kind of not a legacy in that you're destroying stuff, but a legacy in each time you play, you get to add a couple new things to the next game.
Have you played? It's a game again. It's like more of a Euro game. It's called Charterstone. I think it's
Charterstone. I have not played Charterstone.
It's good fun.
It's kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're adding. You got a whole big thing of numbered cards. So you finish this. I'll put these cards in. Now you have this option. Now you can do this, and that's kind of what this game I'm working on is. And it's what I'm doing in my spare time. it'll probably never get published. It's like a little bit of fun for me, but hey, down the line you never know. But it's like all the monsters are like poker chips in a bag, and you draw things out, and when you get to a new area, you discover new monsters and they go into the bag. So when you go back to a different area you've been to before, you've now kind of got those monsters coming out, and it's a fun little thing. And I like the idea of unlocking weapons and having that kind of, as a solo player, I'm playing this and I'm unlocking new parts of the game. So when I come back and play it again, it's different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm enjoying at the moment. But other than that, it's all stuff that I can't talk about, unfortunately.
That's fine. We're not
here in position, So.
Yeah, the Dungeon Dive is not concerned with scoops. There's too much. There's too much stuff already.
There's too many games already. This is the thing. Like, I keep thinking, are there too many games?
Yes. Well, right. I mean, just right now, I've like laid stuff out on my table, and I've got like 6 new things that I just found on itch.io.
Yeah,
in the past,
I love that site. I love
in the
that.
past
so
2
much
weeks.
The creativity on there is astonishing.
Yeah,
it makes me feel so old and slow. The stuff you see and a load of these little indie designers who are doing things like, oh, that's just so freaking clever.
Yeah,
but
I love that. And that's kind of where I'm moving. Like the Dungeon Dive has kind of been moving towards simpler games that don't take. I'm kind of in this this mode now where I'm just like, I want games that are like effortlessly fun.
Yeah.
Where I don't have to spend a week learning the game and playing it, and then
I want to open it, play it, put it away. That's what I want from a game these days.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like the problem is, obviously, I mean, I work several months to a year in advance, so I'm booking gigs for like next year or something. All the people I work for tend to want big, explosive, loud things to go on Kickstarter, and I'm just kind of that thing where I just want to make some little games that I can just enjoy. I've made a couple of little like 2-page RPGs that I've put up on itch, and I love it. And like whenever I sell one of those, it's like $2 a go. Whenever that email you've sold one of these, like that is the sweetest like payment I ever get. It's like a fraction of what I get from anything else, but it feels so fresh.
Yeah, and that's kind of like if I can get a little RPG where the rules fit on one page. And that's why I'm kind of like really into like Morkborg and Scarlet Heroes now. It's like, wow, these games are so simple, but if I want more complexity, I can just sprinkle in other little things I have around the room.
I think one of my favorite things, my favorite piece of advice to new game designers is don't stick to the thing that you know. Like if you're a board game designer, go out and play RPGs. Go and look at everything. Look at sports. Look at folk games. Whatever else. Because I'd like the RPG movement, the indie RPG movement. It's got so many interesting ideas. I mean, half the reason that's I think Silver Tower was good.
Have you played any of these?
No, but I've seen them. What?
Yeah,
tell me.
There are these new. So I've covered the golf one, History Maker Golf.
Oh, have you?
And this is History Maker Baseball, which I'm gonna check out. They're really interesting little sports games because they're not concerned with simulating the sport. They're concerned with telling the story of a game. And so you roll dice and then you consult these charts in this book.
Look at that.
It's just a bunch of lookup charts. You roll a handful of dice and you look at things, and then your players have different keywords, or the different ballparks that you are in have different keywords, or maybe you've rolled up like your manager had a bad conversation with like one of the umpires before the game, and that gives you a keyword that you play. And then you roll dice and then you look up all those keywords and you figure out what happens in that moment of the game. And I played the golf one and I loved it. And I was like, okay, why has nobody made a dungeon crawl like this where you're not concerned with simulating adventures going into the dungeon? You're not concerned with a move by move, but it's more of an abstracted dungeon crawl, but it still gives you that story that we want in a dungeon crawl. You should check these out. They're made by Play.
Yeah, I'm gonna look those up. That looks incredible.
They have a bowling one. They have a professional wrestling. I think they have a what is it? Not highlight, but lacrosse. I think
Yeah.
I don't know if they have any like cricket or any of the like
Oh, that's awesome.
but
That sounds really cool. I'm going to look that up. That sounds amazing.
Really
But
interesting.
what an interesting idea. What an interesting idea. And but what I love is you'll now see that will happen and it'll go under the radar for a while. But then a designer will have played it and will put something from that into a different game, and that will trickle down, and you'll start seeing things like the same way that like occasionally a board game comes out that does a thing and it brings that mechanic into the focus, whatever it is. Silver Tower wouldn't be where it was if Dead of Winter hadn't come first and had done the whole roll your dice, select your actions. And a few games have done it, but that's one I played most, and I was like, I love that thing of like,
I love that mechanism.
It's the input versus output randomness. It's like you roll the dice and you make your choices rather than, of course, being a Games Workshop game, you then roll more dice. But like, I love the fact that you can. It's that interesting kind of decision. Oh, what do I do? Do I do this or this or this? So yeah, I'd love to see if like those ideas from that then kind of filter through into other things. I'd love to see a dungeon, like say, dungeon crawl based with that kind of idea.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I haven't got time. I can't do it. But I want to now.
Get on it.
Oh dear.
All right, well, James, stick around. We'll end up the interview, but you don't have to leave quite yet. But I just wanted to say thank you for taking time today and talking to me. And I think
it's been great fun. Thank you so much. I always love these chats.
Yeah, it's been fantastic fun. So, all right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll talk to you later.